The customer told me the manager would fire me for this mistake. I am the owner. You just cost me $400 and I'm making sure you lose your job today. The woman slammed her receipt on the counter so hard my coffee cup rattled. I'd been processing inventory in the back office when I heard shouting from the electronics department and came out to help. Saturday afternoons at Campbell Electronics were always busy, but this was different. The woman's face was red, and she was attracting a crowd of at least 15 people, all of them holding their shopping baskets and watching the drama unfold like it was street theater. I picked up the receipt and scanned it quickly. She'd bought a high-end camera 2 weeks ago during our spring sale, one of our Nikon DSLRs that retailed for $800, but we'd marked down to $400 to move old inventory before the new models arrived. The serial number matched our system, and everything looked legitimate on paper. Ma'am, I can definitely help you with whatever the issue is. Can you tell me what happened with the camera? My assistant manager Kyle hovered nearby, looking nervous, his hand actually shaking slightly as he held a clipboard. He'd only been with us 3 months after transferring from a big box retailer where he said management threw employees under the bus at the first sign of customer complaint. This was clearly beyond anything his previous training had prepared him for, and I could see him calculating whether to intervene or run for cover. What happened is, your incompetent staff sold me a defective camera, and now you're refusing to honor your return policy. She pulled out her phone and started recording me, the red recording light visible on her screen. I'm documenting this entire interaction so when I report you to corporate, they'll see exactly how terrible you people are. I want names, I want badge numbers, I want everything on record. I kept my expression neutral, even though I knew there was no corporate to report to. I'd bought this store from a regional chain 5 years ago and operated it independently, but most customers still assumed we were part of some larger organization. That misconception usually worked in my favor because it meant people treated us with the same expectations they had for big retailers. But occasionally it created situations like this where someone expected a corporate hierarchy that didn't exist. I'm sorry you're having trouble with the camera. Our return policy is 30 days with receipt, and you're well within that window. Let's see what we can do to resolve this. I kept my voice level and professional, using the tone I'd developed over 15 years of retail work before scraping together enough money to buy this place. The tone that said I was taking you seriously without actually committing to anything specific. She shoved the camera box at me hard enough that I had to catch it to prevent it from falling. I set it on the counter carefully and opened it, immediately noticing the packaging was wrong. The foam inserts were backwards, and the lens cap was missing entirely. The camera itself had visible scratches on the lens housing, and the body showed signs of impact damage along one corner, where the metal had actually dented inward. There was sand in the battery compartment, not just a few grains, but actual accumulation that suggested prolonged exposure. The memory card slot had water staining around the edges. Ma'am, this camera has been used extensively and appears to have been damaged. Can you tell me what happened to it? I turned the camera so she could see the damage I was pointing out, the dent and the sand and the water stains. Several people in the crowd leaned in to look, and I heard someone whisper that the camera was definitely trashed. Nothing happened. It was defective when I bought it. Her voice got louder and more customers were stopping to watch now, abandoning their shopping to witness whatever was going to happen next. The crowd had grown to maybe 25 people, forming a semicircle around the customer service counter. I took it on one trip to the beach and it stopped working. That's clearly a manufacturing defect and you need to give me a full refund immediately. $400 right now, or I'm calling the police. Kyle leaned over and whispered to me, his breath smelling like the energy drink he'd been nursing all morning. She was just in here yesterday arguing with Stephanie about this same camera. Stephanie told her we couldn't accept it because of the damage, and the customer got so aggressive that Stephanie actually cried in the break room afterward. She called you, but you were at the bank meeting with that loan officer about the expansion. I nodded slightly, remembering the voicemail I'd gotten but hadn't had time to return yet. I'd been at First National discussing financing for opening a second location across town, sitting in that cold office while the loan officer questioned every line item in my business plan. The meeting had run 3 hours, and by the time I got back to the store, the end-of-day rush had started, and I'd completely forgotten about Stephanie's message. I understand your frustration, but our return policy doesn't cover physical damage or water damage. This camera has clearly been exposed to both. I pointed to the sand and the water stains visible inside the battery compartment, then to the impact damage on the corner. The dent here suggests it was dropped, probably onto a hard surface. The sand indicates it was used at a beach without proper protection. The water staining shows it got wet, which these cameras aren't designed to handle without a protective housing. The woman's face went from red to purple, an impressive color transformation that happened in stages. You're calling me a liar? I'm telling you this camera was broken when I bought it, and you're accusing me of damaging it? This is outrageous. This is slander. I could sue you for defamation. Get me your manager right now because you clearly don't have the authority or the intelligence to handle this situation properly. I set the camera down gently on the counter, making sure it was stable so it wouldn't roll off. I can get the manager, but our policy will be the same. Physical damage isn't covered under our return policy. It's printed right here on your receipt. I pointed to the relevant section on the back of the receipt where the return policy was spelled out in detail, including specific exclusions for physical damage, water damage, and missing accessories. I don't care what some fine print says. I know my rights as a consumer. You sold me a defective product, and you're legally required to refund my money. If you don't, I'm calling the police and reporting this store for fraud. I'm also calling the news. Channel 7 has an investigative team that exposes crooked businesses, and they're going to love this story. She was shouting now, and at least 30 customers had formed a crowd around us, watching the drama unfold. Some were recording on their phones, Others were just staring with that uncomfortable expression people get when they witness a public meltdown. Kyle looked at me with panic in his eyes, and I could see him mentally drafting his resignation letter. He clearly wanted me to just give the refund and make this woman go away, to surrender and move on. I'd seen that look from employees before, that desire to cave under pressure just to end the conflict and restore peace. But I'd also seen what happened when you established a precedent of caving to aggressive customers. It created an environment where abuse became a successful strategy, where employees learned that standing up for policy would get them overruled, where the worst customers got the best treatment. Ma'am, I'm going to step into the back and get the manager. Please wait here and I'll have them come speak with you directly. I handed the camera to Kyle and walked toward the storage area, hearing the woman say loudly to the gathered crowd, "Can you believe this? This is what passes for customer service these days. These people have no idea what they're doing. They hire anyone who can fog a mirror and then wonder why customers are unhappy." I grabbed my store owner ID badge from my desk drawer, the one I rarely wore because I preferred working alongside my staff without the formality of announced hierarchy. The badge was slightly dusty, and I had to wipe it off on my polo shirt before clipping it on. I could hear the woman still ranting in the main store area, her voice carrying through the walls. She was telling anyone who would listen about her rights and how she was going to own this store by the time her lawsuit was finished. When I came back out, the woman was talking on her phone very loudly, clearly performing for the audience. "Yes, I'm at Campbell Electronics on Riverside Avenue, and they're refusing to honor their return policy. The employee is completely incompetent and probably didn't even finish high school. I'm demanding to speak to corporate right now. This is discrimination, and I'm going to sue for everything they have." I walked up to the counter and clipped my badge to my polo shirt where it would be clearly visible. The woman glanced at it while still talking on her phone, then did a double take. Her eyes went wide as she read, "Daniel Campbell, owner," printed clearly under my name and above the store logo. The phone slipped slightly in her hand, but she caught it before it fell. "I'll call you back," she said into the phone, her voice suddenly uncertain for the first time since this interaction started. "I'm the manager," I said calmly, keeping my voice level and professional despite the adrenaline making my hands want to shake. "I'm also the owner. There is no corporate office to report to. This is an independent store, has been for 5 years, and I've reviewed your return request personally. The camera shows clear signs of physical damage and water exposure that aren't covered under our return policy or the manufacturer's warranty." The woman's face went through several expressions very quickly, like someone was flipping through channels. Shock, embarrassment, anger, calculation, then back to defiance. "You're lying. You can't be the owner. You're too young and you were working the floor like a regular employee. Real owners don't do manual labor. They sit in offices and count money. This is some kind of trick." Kyle made a small sound that might have been a suppressed laugh or possibly a choking noise. Several customers were pulling out their phones now, recording the interaction from multiple angles. I could see this was going to end up on social media, regardless of how I handled it, which meant I needed to be extremely careful about every word I said from this point forward. I'm 32, and I've owned this store for 5 years. Bought it with money I saved working retail management for 15 years before that. I work the floor regularly because that's how I stay connected to customer needs and staff operations. I stock shelves, I run registers, I help customers find products, but my working style doesn't change our return policy, which is clearly posted and printed on every receipt. "This is discrimination," the woman said, her voice rising again as she found a new angle to attack from. "You're refusing my return because I'm a woman. I'm going to sue you for gender discrimination and put you out of business. My husband is a lawyer, and he's going to destroy you. We're going to own this store when we're done with you." I pulled up our computer system on the register, typing in her phone number from the receipt to access her full purchase history. "Ma'am, I have your complete purchase history here going back 2 years. You've returned items 4 times in the past 6 months. 3 of those returns were accepted without any issues whatsoever. You returned a laptop that you decided you didn't need. We processed it immediately. You returned a printer that wasn't compatible with your computer. We exchanged it for a different model. You returned headphones that didn't fit comfortably. We gave you store credit. This is the first time we've declined a return, and it's specifically because the item shows damage that clearly occurred after purchase. That's not discrimination. That's policy applied consistently to everyone regardless of gender." She looked at the computer screen showing her purchase history, and her expression changed, some of the confidence draining from her face as she realized I had documentation of treating her fairly in the past. "You're tracking me? That's an invasion of privacy. You can't keep records of what I buy. That's illegal. I never gave you permission to track my purchases. This is like those big tech companies spying on everyone. Transaction records are standard retail practice and fully legal. We use them for inventory management and customer service. Every store you shop at keeps similar records. It's how we can process returns without receipts sometimes, how we can offer warranties, how we track what products are popular." I kept my voice educational rather than condescending, though I was getting tired of this circular argument where she just kept pivoting to new accusations when each previous one failed. Other customers in the crowd were murmuring now, and I could hear someone say that the woman was clearly trying to scam us. Another voice said they'd seen people try this at other stores, buying expensive items, using them roughly, then returning them claiming defects. An elderly man said loudly that he respected a business owner who stood by his policies instead of caving to bullies. The woman grabbed her camera and shoved it back in the box, her movements aggressive enough that she nearly knocked over a display of phone cases on the counter. "You haven't heard the last of this. I'm going to every review site and telling everyone what a terrible store this is. Google, Yelp, Facebook, Angie's List, Better Business Bureau, Consumer Reports, everywhere. I'm going to make sure everyone in this city knows you're a scam artist who steals from customers. I'm going to stand outside your store with signs. I'm going to organize protests. That's your right, I said calmly. Though internally, I was calculating the potential damage from a coordinated negative review campaign. But I'd encourage you to be truthful in your reviews, since we have security footage of this entire interaction from 3 different angles, along with multiple witness recordings from customers. Making false statements about a business can have legal consequences. It's called defamation, and it's something businesses can sue over when reviews contain provable lies. She picked up the camera box and her purse, slinging the purse over her shoulder so aggressively that she nearly hit Kyle in the face with it. We'll see who has legal consequences. My brother is a lawyer, and he's going to destroy you. He handles consumer protection cases, and he's going to take you for everything you have. This store, your house, your car, everything. You're going to be living in a cardboard box when he's done with you. If your brother wants to discuss this legally, he can contact my attorney. I'm happy to provide her information. I pulled out one of Patricia's business cards from the holder we kept at the register and held it out. The woman snatched it from my hand and crumpled it without looking at it, throwing it on the floor in what I assumed was meant to be a dramatic gesture, but just came across as childish. She turned to leave, but then spun back around, her hair whipping dramatically like she was in a soap opera. And you're a terrible owner. You should be ashamed of yourself, hiding your identity and tricking customers. That's dishonest and deceptive, and you're going to pay for it. I'm going to make sure everyone knows what kind of person you really are. After she stormed out, slamming the door hard enough that the bell above it nearly fell off, the store was quiet for a moment. Then, one of the customers who'd been recording started clapping slowly, dramatically, like we were at a movie theater. Others joined in, and suddenly I had 36 people applauding, while Kyle looked relieved enough to collapse. An elderly man approached the counter, setting down his basket of cables and adapters. I've been shopping here for 8 years, since before you bought it from that regional chain. I saw what happened with that camera. It was clearly damaged, and she was trying to scam you. Good for you for standing your ground and not letting her bully you into giving her money she didn't deserve. He extended his hand and I shook it, feeling uncomfortable with being celebrated for doing what should be standard practice. I thanked him, but felt awkward with all the attention. I didn't want to be celebrated for simply enforcing reasonable policies, for doing what any responsible business owner would do. Kyle was grinning, though, practically bouncing with relief and excitement. That was amazing. When you put on that badge and her face just dropped, I literally wished I'd started recording earlier. That moment was priceless. Did you see how white she went? We got back to work, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. The woman had been too confident in her threats, too certain that she had power and resources to deploy against me. Sure enough, 2 hours later my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. It was my business attorney, Patricia Okonkwo. Daniel, I just got a very aggressive call from an attorney named Howard Brennan, claiming his client was discriminated against at your store today. He's threatening to file suit unless you issue a full refund and a written apology. I explained the situation while pulling up the security footage on my office computer, watching from multiple angles as the interaction played out. The camera was clearly damaged, Patricia. I have video evidence showing its condition from 3 angles. Multiple customers witnessed the interaction, and several recorded it. Her own recording probably shows she was the aggressor since she was recording when I came out, and she kept recording through most of it. Patricia sighed, and I could hear her typing in the background, probably taking notes or researching Howard Brennan. Her brother is making noise about a lawsuit, but honestly, from what you're telling me, he doesn't have a case. However, you know as well as I do that frivolous lawsuits can still be expensive and time-consuming to defend against. Would it be easier to just refund her money and move on? $400 to make this go away? No. I said it more firmly than I'd intended, my voice harder than I usually let it get. If I cave now, it establishes that aggressive behavior gets rewarded. I've got 22 employees watching how I handle this. I need them to know I'll back them up when customers cross the line. If they see me surrender to threats and intimidation, they'll know that standing up for policy means nothing, because I'll overrule them the moment things get uncomfortable. Okay, Patricia said, and I could hear the shift in her tone from questioning to strategic. I'll draft a response to Howard Brennan. Send me the security footage from all angles, the customer's complete purchase history showing we've processed her returns normally in the past, and statements from any staff who witnessed the interaction. Also get statements from those customers who recorded it if possible. We'll be ready if he actually files, which frankly I doubt he will once he sees how much evidence we have. That night I stayed late reviewing footage and documentation, sitting in my small office under fluorescent lights that buzzed annoyingly. Kyle had gone home, but Stephanie came in for the evening shift and immediately found me in the office. Kyle texted me everything that happened. He said you revealed you were the owner right in front of everyone and her face just died. I'm so glad I wasn't there because I probably would have laughed right in her face. It wasn't particularly satisfying, I admitted, rubbing my eyes because I'd been staring at computer screens for hours. She just pivoted to different attacks instead of backing down. She went from saying I was incompetent to saying I was discriminating to saying I was deceptive. Now her brother's threatening to sue, and I'm going to have to spend time and money defending myself against accusations I know are false. Stephanie's expression darkened, and she sat down in the chair across from my desk. That's the same woman who called me a stupid bitch yesterday when I told her we couldn't accept the return. She said I was clearly uneducated and probably couldn't do basic math. She told me I'd be working retail my whole life because I didn't have the intelligence for anything better. I almost quit after that interaction. I literally went home and started updating my resume because I didn't want to deal with customers like her anymore. That hit me hard, like a physical blow to the chest. Stephanie was one of my best employees, knowledgeable about every product we carried and patient with customers who needed extensive help. She had a degree in electrical engineering, but preferred retail work because she liked interacting with people and helping them solve problems. The idea that she'd almost quit because of one aggressive person made me genuinely angry in a way the woman's attacks on me hadn't. Why didn't you tell me it got that bad? I would have banned her from the store immediately. We have policies about customer behavior, and verbal abuse is absolutely grounds for banning someone permanently. I was already pulling up our incident report system to document what Stephanie was telling me, creating a file that would support any future actions we needed to take. Because it happens all the time, Stephanie said quietly, her voice tired in a way that made her sound older than her 28 years. Maybe not that extreme, but customers talk down to us constantly. They assume we're stupid or lazy or beneath them just because we work retail. They make comments about our intelligence, our life choices, our worth as human beings. Yesterday was just worse than usual, but it wasn't unique. She paused and looked at me directly. But hearing that you stood up to her today, that you didn't just give her what she wanted to make her go away, that actually matters to everyone here. It shows you see this stuff and you care. Kyle already sent a message to the group chat and everyone's talking about it. People are saying they're proud to work here because you have our backs. Over the next few days, the incident took on a life of its own online. Someone had posted their recording to TikTok with the caption, "Karen meets the owner," and it went viral, accumulating hundreds of thousands of views in just 48 hours. The algorithm picked it up and pushed it to millions more people. The comments were mixed. Some people praised me for enforcing policy and not rewarding bad behavior. Others said I should have just given the refund to avoid confrontation and maintain customer satisfaction. A few accused me of staging the whole thing for publicity, claiming no real interaction could be that perfectly dramatic. The negative reviews started appearing Tuesday morning. The woman had followed through on her threat, posting one-star reviews on Google, Yelp, Facebook, the Better Business Bureau, and every other platform she could find. Each review told a dramatically altered version of events where I'd been aggressive and discriminatory, where she'd been calm and reasonable, where the camera had definitely been defective from the start, and I'd refused to honor the warranty out of pure spite. On Google, she wrote, "Worst store ever. Owner pretended to be a regular employee, then ambushed me when I asked for a manager. Discriminated against me because I'm a woman. Refused valid return for defective product. Threatened to sue me for leaving honest reviews. Avoid at all costs." On Yelp, "Terrible customer service. Bought defective camera. They refused return. Owner is dishonest and hides his identity to trick customers. When I asked for manager, he revealed he was the manager in humiliating public spectacle. Other customers recorded me without permission. Traumatic experience." On Facebook, "Do not shop here. Owner Daniel Campbell is a scam artist who sells broken products then refuses returns. Discriminates against women customers. Creates hostile environment. I'm pursuing legal action. Save your money and shop literally anywhere else." I responded to each review professionally, keeping my responses brief and factual. We have security footage documenting this interaction, which shows a different sequence of events than described. Our return policy doesn't cover physical damage that occurs after purchase. This policy is applied consistently for all customers. The customer's purchase history shows we've successfully processed 3 previous returns for her without issue. I didn't engage with her accusations or defend myself beyond stating facts. Patricia had advised me that getting into arguments in review responses would only make things worse and could potentially be used against me if the situation did go to court. "Keep it short, keep it factual, don't show emotion," she'd said. Wednesday brought a certified letter requiring signature from Howard Brennan's law office. The envelope was intimidating, thick and official-looking with a return address embossed in raised letters. I signed for it and opened it in my office, reading the formal demand letter that sought $400 for the camera refund, $2,000 for emotional distress and public humiliation, and a written apology to be posted on all our social media accounts and sent to at least 50 people from his sister's contact list. The letter claimed I'd created a hostile environment through deceptive practices by not immediately identifying myself as the owner. It argued that by working the floor in a regular employee uniform without announcing my ownership, I had entrapped his sister into making statements she wouldn't have made if she'd known my true position. The letter called this fraudulent misrepresentation of status and claimed it constituted intentional infliction of emotional distress. Patricia called after I'd emailed her a scan of the letter. "This is complete nonsense, Daniel. Working your own retail floor isn't deceptive. You weren't hiding, you just weren't advertising your position. There's no legal requirement to announce your ownership status to every customer. And emotional distress requires actual damages beyond just hurt feelings from being told no. You'd need to show therapy bills, medical documentation, something concrete." She paused, and I heard her office chair creak as she shifted position. "But I need to ask you again, are you absolutely sure you want to fight this? Because it's going to cost you more in legal fees than the camera refund would have. I'm expensive, and even if we win, you're not getting attorney fees back in small claims court. You're looking at probably $2,000 in legal costs to fight a $400 refund demand." "I'm sure," I said without hesitation. "This isn't about the money anymore. It's about whether aggressive customers can bully small businesses into compliance through threats and lawsuits. It's about showing my staff that doing the right thing will be supported even when it's expensive. If I cave now, I'm teaching everyone that policy doesn't matter and whoever threatens loudest wins." Patricia drafted our response denying all claims and offering to provide extensive evidence supporting our position if they chose to file suit. The response was professional but firm, making clear we had documentation, including security footage, purchase history, witness statements, and the customer's own edited video that we could compare to the full footage to show manipulation. The response apparently didn't satisfy Howard Brennan, because on Friday I received notice that he'd actually filed a lawsuit in small claims court. The filing claimed discrimination, deceptive business practices, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The damages sought were now $2,500, having increased by $300 to include the filing fees. It was ridiculous. Every attorney I'd consulted said so, but now it was also real. I'd have to take time away from running my business to appear in court and defend myself against false accusations. Kyle found me in the office reading through the lawsuit documents for the third time, trying to make sure I understood every claim and allegation. Is this really happening? Are you actually getting sued over that camera? He looked genuinely worried, like the lawsuit might somehow affect his job security. I feel like this is partly my fault. If I'd just processed the return when she first asked Stephanie, if I'd been here that day and just given her the money, none of this would have happened. Then she'd have learned that screaming and threatening gets results, I said, looking up from the legal documents. And next time she'd do it again, probably to you or Stephanie or whoever was working. Maybe she'd get worse because the behavior was rewarded. She'd push further, demand more, because she'd know that aggression works. This needed to happen eventually. Better now when we have documentation than later when we might not. Kyle didn't look entirely convinced, but he nodded slowly. Everyone's been talking about it. The other stores in the plaza heard what happened, and some of the owners have reached out asking how you're handling it. Apparently this woman has caused problems at other places too. The coffee shop manager said she demanded a refund on a latte she'd already drunk because it wasn't hot enough. The bookstore owner said she tried to return books she'd clearly read, with cracked spines and coffee stains. That was interesting information I hadn't known. Did anyone actually refuse her and face consequences? Kyle shook his head. They all just gave her what she wanted because it was easier than fighting. But now they're all saying they wish they'd stood up to her like you did. The coffee shop manager said she's inspired, and next time someone tries that, she's refusing. Social media had turned the lawsuit into another drama cycle. The viral video had been connected to my store through the distinctive logo visible on my polo shirt and the store name visible on signs in the background. Now people were following the story like it was a reality TV show. Some created GoFundMe campaigns to help with my legal costs without my permission or knowledge. Others organized to flood Howard Brennan's law office with negative reviews and angry phone calls. I had to issue a public statement on our Facebook page and Instagram asking people not to harass anyone involved, explaining that I was handling this through proper legal channels and didn't want anyone to take actions that could complicate the case. While I appreciate the support, please do not contact the opposing attorney or leave negative reviews about their practice. This needs to be resolved in court, not through online harassment. The statement got thousands of likes and hundreds of comments. Most were supportive, saying they respected my position and would follow my wishes. But some people ignored it entirely and continued their harassment campaign anyway. Howard Brennan's law office had to take their phone offline temporarily because they were getting hundreds of calls from people around the country. Someone created a parody Twitter account called Howard Brennan's Terrible Legal Advice that posted fake legal tips. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks out. During that time, business actually increased substantially. People came in specifically because they'd seen the video and wanted to support a small business owner standing up to an abusive customer. Our daily revenue jumped by almost 30%. Several told me stories of their own experiences with terrible customers or bosses who'd never backed them up when they faced abuse. One woman brought her teenage daughter in to meet me specifically. I want her to see that doing the right thing matters even when it's hard, she explained, while her daughter looked embarrassed. She's been getting bullied at her retail job at the mall, and her manager tells her to just accept it, that customer satisfaction is all that matters. I want her to know there are better places to work, places where management actually values employees. The daughter looked at me shyly. My manager made me apologize to a customer who called me a racial slur because he spent $500, and she said we couldn't afford to lose him as a customer. I felt horrible, like I didn't matter at all. I gave her my business card and told her we were hiring if she ever wanted to work somewhere different, somewhere that wouldn't tolerate that kind of treatment. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep at all. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, reviewing everything in my mind. The security footage showing the damaged camera, the purchase history proving we'd treated her fairly on previous returns, the witness statements from Kyle, Stephanie, and 3 customers who'd provided their contact information, the documentation of the camera's damage with detailed photos. Patricia had assured me we had a strong case, but I knew court outcomes weren't always predictable. I also knew that regardless of the legal result, this whole situation had already cost me time, money, and stress that I really couldn't afford. The legal fees alone were approaching $3,000. I'd spent probably 40 hours dealing with this situation, time I could have spent growing the business or training staff or developing new vendor relationships. The emotional toll was harder to quantify, but definitely real. At 4 in the morning, I gave up on sleep and went to the store, letting myself in with my keys and turning on just enough lights to see. I walked through the aisles, straightening products that didn't need straightening, organizing shelves that were already organized. It was meditative, repetitive work that let my mind settle. This store represented everything I'd worked for, 15 years of saving and planning and sacrificing to build something of my own. The idea that someone could threaten all of that over a damaged camera felt surreal. The small claims courtroom was less formal than I'd expected, more like a conference room than the dramatic courtrooms you see on TV. There were no jury boxes or witness stands, just a judge's bench and several tables for the parties. Judge Morrison presided over a crowded docket, moving through cases efficiently, spending maybe 10 minutes on each before rendering decisions. When our case was called around 10:30, the woman appeared with her brother Howard. She'd dressed conservatively in a modest dress and cardigan, her demeanor completely different from the aggressive person I'd dealt with in my store. She looked like a reasonable middle-class mom who'd been wronged by a business, and I realized that was entirely intentional. Howard presented their case first, speaking in that smooth attorney voice designed to sound both reasonable and authoritative. He painted a picture of his sister as a victim who'd purchased a defective camera in good faith and been humiliated by an owner pretending to be a regular employee. He claimed I'd deliberately deceived her, creating a trap where she'd make statements she wouldn't have made if she'd known my true position. He argued this was intentional infliction of emotional distress, that I'd set her up for public humiliation. He showed the video she'd recorded but edited carefully to remove her most aggressive moments and my calmest responses. In the edited version, she looked confused and frustrated, while I looked dismissive and cold. He'd cut out the parts where she threatened to call police, where she insulted my intelligence and education, where she threw my attorney's business card on the floor. What remained made me look like I was refusing a reasonable request without justification. When Patricia stood to present our defense, she played the full security footage from multiple angles. Judge Morrison watched silently as the video showed the woman's escalating aggression, her shoving the camera at me, her recording me without permission, her threatening phone call where she loudly claimed she'd sue for everything I had. The footage also clearly showed the camera's condition, with Patricia pausing at several points to zoom in on the damage, the dented corner, the sand in the battery compartment, the water staining around the memory card slot. Patricia then introduced the woman's purchase history, showing 4 previous returns that were processed normally without any issues. She showed my business license and registration, proving I was the legal owner and had been for 5 years. She presented written statements from Kyle, Stephanie, and 3 customers who'd witnessed the interaction. One customer had provided an especially detailed statement describing how the woman had been aggressive and threatening from the moment she entered the store. Finally, Patricia showed the woman's edited video next to the full security footage on a split screen, playing them simultaneously so Judge Morrison could see exactly what had been cut and how the editing changed the context of the interaction. It was damning, showing clear manipulation of evidence to misrepresent what actually happened. Judge Morrison stopped the video playback and asked the woman directly about the discrepancies. "Ma'am, can you explain why your video recording is missing significant portions of this interaction?" She stumbled through an explanation about how her phone had technical issues and some parts didn't record properly, that sometimes phones just stop recording randomly. But the portions that failed to record are conveniently the ones where you made threats and used insulting language. Judge Morrison's tone made clear he didn't find this credible. The woman said she didn't know why those specific parts were missing, that technology was unpredictable. Judge Morrison asked why she'd threatened to call police if the camera was defective rather than simply requesting to speak with a manager. She said she'd been upset and didn't mean those specific words, that people say things when they're emotional. He asked about her previous successful returns at the same store. She said those were different situations that weren't relevant to this case. Then Judge Morrison turned to me with a question I hadn't fully prepared for. "Mr. Campbell, why didn't you identify yourself as the owner immediately when this customer became agitated? Could that have prevented this entire situation?" I thought carefully before answering, aware that my response would potentially affect his decision. "Your Honor, I was working the floor as I normally do. I stock shelves, help customers, run registers, do everything my employees do. I don't announce my ownership to every customer I interact with because I don't think it should be relevant. Our policies apply equally regardless of who's enforcing them." I paused, choosing my next words carefully. If I have to announce my position to be treated with basic respect, that suggests customers think regular employees don't deserve respect. My staff shouldn't have to face different treatment than I do just because they don't own the building. The problem wasn't that I didn't identify myself quickly enough. The problem was that this customer felt entitled to be aggressive and insulting towards someone she perceived as lower status. Judge Morrison nodded slowly and made some notes on his legal pad. The courtroom was quiet enough that I could hear every scratch of his pen. "I've reviewed all the evidence presented here today. The security footage clearly shows the camera was damaged beyond normal wear and tear. There's physical damage, water damage, and foreign material inside the device. The plaintiff's purchase history shows she's been treated fairly on previous returns, undermining claims of discrimination. The plaintiff's own recording, though edited, still contains evidence of aggressive behavior toward store staff." He paused and looked directly at the woman. "Ma'am, I understand you're frustrated about losing money on a camera that stopped working, but the evidence shows that camera was damaged after purchase, most likely through use in conditions it wasn't designed for. The store's return policy clearly excludes physical damage, and you were made aware of this policy at the time of purchase." Judge Morrison continued. "As for the claim of deceptive practices, there is no legal requirement for a business owner to announce their ownership status to customers. Mr. Campbell was working in his own store, which is entirely appropriate. The claim of intentional infliction of emotional distress fails because there was no outrageous conduct on the store's part. Refusing a return based on clearly stated policy does not constitute emotional distress." He looked down at his notes again. "This lawsuit is dismissed with prejudice, meaning it cannot be refiled. The plaintiff is ordered to pay the defendant's court costs in the amount of $250. I'm also ordering the plaintiff to remove all online reviews related to this incident within 30 days, as the reviews contain provably false statements that constitute defamation." Howard Brennan stood quickly, his face flushed. "Your Honor, I'd like to note for the record that this ruling discriminates against consumers who have legitimate complaints and creates a chilling effect on honest reviews." Judge Morrison gave him a sharp look that could have cut glass. "Counselor, legitimate complaints don't require editing video evidence or making false claims of discrimination. Honest reviews don't need to omit relevant facts to make their point. This ruling stands." Next case. Outside the courthouse, Howard pulled me aside before I could get to my car. "This isn't over. We can appeal this decision and we will. My sister was genuinely wronged here, and no judge's ruling changes that fundamental fact. You took advantage of her and you know it. I looked at him steadily, tired of this entire situation. Your sister tried to return damaged merchandise that she damaged herself through misuse. When I enforced a reasonable policy that's clearly posted, she threatened me, insulted me, called me stupid and uneducated, and lied about what happened. Then you filed a frivolous lawsuit hoping I'd settle rather than fight back. You both made choices that led directly to this outcome. You could have apologized and moved on. You chose escalation. He opened his mouth to argue, but his sister touched his arm, her face pale. Leave it alone, Howard. Let's just go. She looked at me, and for a moment I thought she might actually apologize, might show some recognition that her behavior had been wrong. Instead, she said, "You should have just given me the refund. None of this had to happen. All of this conflict, all this stress, over $400. You're so stubborn you couldn't just make a customer happy." Then they walked away, and I stood there in the courthouse parking lot, thinking about how some people never quite grasped the concept of accountability, never understood that their actions had consequences. Patricia joined me, carrying her briefcase and looking satisfied. That went better than expected. Judge Morrison saw right through their case immediately. You won't hear from them again, and if they do try to appeal, it'll be thrown out at the first review. She was right. No appeal was filed, and the deadline passed without any action from Howard Brennan. The woman never returned to my store, and her negative reviews were quietly removed from all platforms within the 30-day deadline, probably on advice from her brother to avoid contempt charges. But the memory of those reviews lingered, and occasionally someone would reference them when considering shopping with us, asking if we really discriminated against customers or refused legitimate returns. The viral video eventually faded from active social media circulation, though it still popped up occasionally when people searched for retail conflict stories or examples of entitled customers. More important than the video's reach were the changes at my store. I implemented new policies explicitly protecting staff from customer abuse, including clear authority to refuse service to anyone who became aggressive or threatening. The policy manual now stated that verbal abuse, threats, or discrimination toward staff would result in immediate ban from the store. I held training sessions on de-escalation techniques, but also on recognizing when de-escalation wasn't appropriate or safe. We role-played scenarios where employees practiced setting boundaries and calling for management support. Most importantly, I made sure every employee knew they could walk away from an abusive customer, and I would back them completely, even if it meant losing a sale or facing a complaint. Stephanie stayed with the company and eventually became my general manager, overseeing operations at both locations when we finally opened the second store 18 months after the lawsuit. Kyle grew more confident in handling difficult customers, learning to enforce policy firmly while remaining professional. Several employees told me they'd turned down higher-paying jobs elsewhere because they valued working in an environment where they were supported and protected. That became my greatest pride, not the successful legal defense or the viral video, but the culture shift that showed employees their dignity mattered more than any individual sale. We lost a few customers who were used to getting their way through aggression, but we gained many more who appreciated shopping somewhere that treated staff with respect. 3 years later, my accountant was reviewing the annual financial statements and commented on something interesting. You know what I noticed? Your revenue increased 32% in the year following that lawsuit. The quarter immediately after was up 40%. The publicity probably brought in customers who liked what you stood for, and they stayed because the service was good. I thought about that. Success built on someone else's public humiliation felt uncomfortable. But I'd never asked for that video to go viral, or for people to make it a cause. What I'd asked for was the right to enforce reasonable policies without being threatened or sued. The fact that standing firm had attracted customers who valued that stance was an unintended but welcome consequence. The real legacy wasn't the money or the attention. It was the conversations that happened afterward in break rooms across the city, in online forums where retail workers talked about respect and boundaries. It was the other small business owners who reached out asking advice on handling similar situations, wanting to know how to protect their staff without risking their business. It was knowing that maybe some customers thought twice before screaming at service workers because they'd seen that consequences were possible. Last month, a young woman came in asking for a job application, filling it out carefully at the counter while the evening rush flowed around her. As I reviewed her application later, I noticed she'd worked retail for 4 years at 3 different stores. When I called her in for an interview and asked why she was looking to change jobs, she said she'd been verbally abused by customers at every position. Her managers always sided with customers regardless of what happened, telling her that customer satisfaction was the only thing that mattered. "I saw your video," she said quietly. "The one with that woman and the camera. I saw you stand up for yourself and your staff. I want to work somewhere where management actually has our backs, where we're not just punching bags for angry customers. I know you probably get a lot of applications because of that video, but I'm serious about wanting to work here. I'm good at my job. I just need to work somewhere that values employees as much as sales." I hired her 2 weeks later, and watching her relax into the realization that we'd actually back her up reminded me why the whole ordeal had been worth it. Her name was Nina, and she had a degree in computer science, but preferred retail work because she loved helping people solve technical problems. On her 3rd day, a customer started getting aggressive with her over a return that was outside our policy window. She calmly explained the policy, offered alternatives, and when the customer began raising his voice, she called for me without hesitation. I backed her decision completely, escorting the customer out when he refused to lower his voice. As he left, he shouted that he'd never shop here again and would tell everyone he knew to avoid us. Nina looked worried, like maybe she'd cost the store a valuable customer. I told her the truth. We were better off without customers who thought screaming was an acceptable negotiation tactic. Her relief was visible and immediate. Sometimes standing firm costs something in the short term, but the alternative costs more in ways that aren't always visible on a balance sheet. Employee turnover, damaged morale, toxic workplace culture, these have real costs that don't show up as line items. Building a place where people felt respected and supported, that was worth defending even when it meant facing lawsuits and public attacks. The woman with the camera probably never understood that lesson, but my staff did, my customers did, and that mattered more.